Now by Michael Planey. He's an airline technology consultant here in Washington, D.C. Michael, it's early, of course, but what are your thoughts? What are some of the things that could contribute to something like this?
Well, the eyewitness reports were that the aircraft, shortly after takeoff, took a hard bank to the right. That suggests a flight control problem. It could also suggest an engine problem where you had asymmetrical thrust, one engine going out and therefore thrust only on one side of the wing, causing the aircraft and the pilots to lose control. There are obviously many training scenarios that the pilots go through for one engine inoperative type of takeoffs, also for hard rudder overs or something where there would be uncommanded flight control movement. But unfortunately, whatever happened here was so serious and onset so quickly that it was unrecoverable.
Let me ask you about something. We had a former pilot on earlier talking about when you lease and the different types of crews you can have. You can have the crews that are with the airline normally, or you can have a crew that comes in that's familiar with the plane. Are there different problems with different scenarios like that?
The global aviation industry is so large that these scenarios exist continuously. Half the time when you are flying on an aircraft, just because the name is on the outside, it doesn't mean that's who's operating or staffing that particular airline. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States. It doesn't matter where else in the world you may be. It's a very common scenario. They're wet leases, dry leases, a lot of other industry terms used to describe whether the crew is owned by the airline or employed by the airline, whether the aircraft is employed or the aircraft is owned by the airline or a third-party company. It's very common. It's been very safe. I don't expect that you're going to see any issues pertaining to the ownership or the leasing of the aircraft.
What about the age of the plane? Is that a concern?
I think that's always a concern. This aircraft was 38 years, 11 months old, according to Boeing's data. There are a number of what in the United States would be called aging aircraft initiatives, meaning specific maintenance programs that are put in place, milestones and targets and inspections that have to be met for aircraft as they get beyond the normal 20-year first life expectancy. These aircraft can be operated very safely. They can be operated into the 40 and 42-year range of life, but it requires continuous monitoring of things like the engines, of the airframe itself, of the flight controls. So I think that'll be one of the first things they start to look into, whether it's the Boeing technical team that Giles alluded to, or whether we're talking about the Cuban authorities or someone else.
What are some of the questions that'll be asked in the next couple of days to try and bore down and get to the answers?
I think before they even ask the questions, the important thing will be whether they can recover the black boxes. Obviously, those contain the most critical information, what sensors or what information they can get from the sensors and instruments on the aircraft. It'll also have a cockpit voice recorder, so they'll be able to listen to what the crew was saying. And a lot of times when you marry those two pieces of information together, you get essentially a 360-degree view of what was happening in the cockpit. That's always the first key. Try to grab those. Then they'll look for things like eyewitness or aircraft surveillance video. The airport sometimes will have its own surveillance radar data. They'll marry all of the technical data they can with the eyewitness reports, with the black box information, and that's where the investigation starts.
And when you see something as destructive as this crash, it's rare that you have survivors, but there are people who are alive from this. If they pull through, can they provide information?
It always depends upon the condition that they're in. We've heard that there are 3 survivors. We don't know what their medical state is at this point. If they're able to provide any information, it'll be anecdotal, but they will be able to tell you whether there were any surprising sounds or whether there was fluid or an explosion or fire. Those are the things that everybody will want to start from the eyewitness reports and look at and try to winnow itself down to the truth.
Michael Planey, always a pleasure having you on the broadcast. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.